Mr. Rainwater.
Yeah, Joe.
We are going to come at this topic from two different positions. Now, I'm not trying to blow you up as bigger than you are, but you are a artist, creator, whatever term you want to apply.
Okay.
With content that has a very large fan base relative to me
Sure.
or anyone else who's, I don't want to say just starting out because neither of us are that, but are not a household name. We'll put it like that. You know what I mean? Like, not like people just don't know your name, but a fair amount of people know your content.
Sure.
Me, on the other hand, some people might know my name and they're wondering where the fuck I'm going to put out some content. The point that I'm getting at here, though, in terms of the fan base, the following, so on and so forth. I am more on the following end than I am on the creative end. You, on the other hand, are more on the creating end, seeing a following grow and follow, so to speak.
Sure.
So I'm curious to know your perspective on this particular topic, but I have noticed, just being a fan, that there are other fans who I gravitate towards simply because I'm lonely. They're not around here, around these parts. There are people who are not into the same things that I'm into. Mm-hmm. So online, I find other people who share similar interests, and obviously we get along well. Now, that being said, I'm also a creator. And I also I like to believe I have a pretty level head on my shoulders.
I think so.
Thank you.
I will affirm that.
I appreciate that. There are a fair amount of people who do not have a fair head on their shoulders, who kind of go all in on either a particular fandom or all of their fandoms to the point where it can be uncomfortable for people, for quote unquote normal people who have passions and interests and so on and so forth. And then there's people who take it to the next level. And I'm not demeaning particular fan groups, but I'm also I'm not lifting them up, if that makes any sense. I got you. I'm standing from afar going, these people might have mental health issues. And
because of the level of how much they're immersed into the thing.
It's not so much about the level. It's about the refusal to acknowledge that there is a real world outside of it.
I gotcha.
Do you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't care.
Is that like people who like form, like the Jedi Knights as a religion? Like in the UK, like that's a thing, you know?
Yeah. So in the horror community, there's a guy who remodeled his entire house to look like Michael Myers' house. And yeah, it's pretty crazy. It's awesome. I think that's pretty awesome. He's not dressed up as Michael Myers. You know what I mean? Like he doesn't go around killing people. I don't think he's ever been in a Michael Myers suit, from what I can see. He just really loves the movie. He thought, my house looks boring, I'm going to make it look like Michael Myers' house. That's what he wants to do, because that's something that he's really into. I think he knows there's a line between the movie and reality.
Yeah.
On the other hand, like you said, there are people who will sit in front of a bouncy ball, and they will hold out their hand, and they will literally try to convince themselves they can conjure, quote unquote, the force, and make the ball go. And and they are dead serious about it. So.
Yeah, in middle school, I attempted to train myself to like shoot Kamehamehas from my hand because I was so into Dragon Ball Z. Like, it's acceptable in middle school, and then after I think after about the age of 15, it's like, come on, loser, you got to do something with your life.
Yeah, I mean, when you're young, it's like Santa Claus, the Tooth Fairy, it's all that kind of stuff. You can believe in that fun stuff, and it's imagination and fun, and it keeps you out of trouble and this and that. There's a million great things about it. When you're 47 and shockingly have a wife and 2 kids, and you are legitimately going to a quote unquote Jedi temple on Tuesday nights.
Right.
There's a
I mean, I don't know. What are the potlucks like at a Jedi temple? You know, like
if it's like legitimately just a bunch of fans who like to get together and you know, talk Star Wars and, you know, cosplay or whatever. I'm not putting that down at all. I'm talking about the people who think it's a legitimate religion, who want the check mark box on like the U.S. Census form. Like
that makes me wonder if there is like a conversation that goes on in the temple where people are like, I think this guy's taking it a little too seriously.
Yeah. And that's the guy who ends up being, you know, the Jedi Master, the Yoda of the temple. And the next thing you know, it turns into a fucking cult.
All right.
So I'm curious to know from you as a creator with a large fandom, have you ever had brushes where people see Trailer Park Warlock and almost like they have quote unquote entered that world, that reality, and they kind of live it? Or has it always been a pretty level-headed, you know, understanding fandom?
So far, like very level-headed and understanding. And I think because I attempted to write the story with enough like aspects in it that are from outside of like that story in itself. This was my attempt to make it sort of grounded, quote unquote, in reality. By that, I mean like stories and ideas that are a little bit outside of just the story itself. So it isn't just like this repetitive cycle within itself. I don't know if that makes sense. Like it isn't just like self-contained, and you can go outside of it and you can go okay. I'm trying to figure out how to get around talking about this, because some of the stuff in Trailer Park Warlock is based off of like, I'll say quote unquote real world ideas about the occult, about ideas people have had in the past about spirituality and magic and stuff like that. Like you can listen to Coast AM on any given night and find a lot of the topics that I cover in the story covered on there, because these are topics that are just like that pop up, you know, stuff like UFOs and, you know, psychic abilities, shit like that, you know, like all that's to me is fun and interesting because it straddles that line of maybe it's real, maybe it's not. And so for me, I like that. I like that line of I'm not sure if it's real or not, because it allows me to kind of it just makes me curious, right? And so I think it attracts, so far it's attracted a fan base who I think has similar curiosities and also similar skepticism. So I don't have proof of this, but I would like to think that the subject matter invites people who tend towards skepticism, and because of that tend towards not being fanatic. We'll see. I could be totally wrong about that, and I end up, you know, one day running into somebody who scares the shit out of me, right? Or I'm just like, oh God, what have I done?
Well, I mean, like it could very well go that way. I feel like the tone of your piece, and I say that as an all-encompassing word of Trailer Park Warlock. I feel like because the tone is more comedic at times, like you have that kind of like absurdist, fantastical humor sometimes, that attracts that fan base where anyone who would go crazy on you is the guy who reads it and goes, that's not factually accurate. When you cast a spell like this is how you have to roll 3 dice and then slit the throat of a toad. Like, you know what I mean? Like those are the people who are going to be trolling you right now.
For sure.
Have you had that? Have you had any of like the pushback about like creative liberty or anything from any fandoms?
I have definitely had some conversations and read comments by people who read the comic who either usually what it is though is they'll just say, well, you know, in the real world version, it's like this, or like my experiences have been with this, and not necessarily like you're wrong, because I think they're able to accept that like this is still fantasy, even though it has a lot of aspects to it that are very grounded, you know, and even in the wording of what I was going to say, in reality, it's like, how do you even define reality in that sense? Because for me, there are certain experiences that I've had that I would say are outside of the norm. I wouldn't necessarily call them like, magic or whatever, but like they're outside of the norm. So like I would say extra normal phenomenon. I don't know what else to put it, but sure. Like, having had those experiences, that's what I try and play with that idea. And so like, there are definitely people in the world who are like 100% in, and want to believe, right? Like there are people who have experiences with like, and I feel like this is tangential to the fan base topic. They've had experiences where they 100% believe like they were abducted by aliens, or like they 100% believe like, they've seen ghosts and stuff like that. You're not going to like, there's very little that you can do to argue with them, to like convince them of the opposite, or like, hey, maybe you need to be skeptical of this. Like, it's not necessarily a fan base, but it's like a true believer. Maybe that's another way of putting it, where you have fan bases can become potentially malignant, maybe, when you have the true believer mentalities. And you can apply this to everything. Right?
Literally.
You can apply this to political stuff, right? Where you have people who are 100% that candidate, and anybody else who has any other, like they're going to vote for somebody else, they're evil or they're stupid or whatever.
Extremism. Right? Yeah. That's kind of prevalent in our current society. I'm not surprised that it goes towards fandom. I'm dealing with that right now. It's at the time of this recording, it's November 1st. So to those of you listening in the future, whenever you may be listening, it's the day after Halloween. I am a Christmas nerd. I am also a giant horror and Halloween nerd. So I'm getting the extremist pushback right now because my Twitter is all holiday jolly, baby. And all of the Halloween people who just cannot take a vacation from pumpkins and dead leaves are totally trying to shit on my parade. And I don't know about, I don't like that. I think variety is the spice of life. I go hard in the paint from like March, April through October for Halloween. So I really don't think taking November and December for another holiday, for a little, not emotional, but like a brain vacation from a holiday and a substance material is not a bad thing. I think that keeps me grounded and level headed. But like the fandom for it, they can be rabid to a point that's not fun. Like I can take like ball busting. I feel like that's healthy. I think that's fun, where people can go back and forth and joke about, oh, Christmas sucks and this and that. And I can take it as well as I can give it. But there are some people who I could be giving it thinking that they're taking it, and they have been throwing shit on fire to throw at me. I'm reading the tone wrong. And that fandom is, I don't think that's something that can be admired. I think that's something that's toxic to somebody's personal health. You know what I mean? Like, there's a reason why people like that get bitter and they get so angry, and it's because so many people just end up leaving them. Like, it can get very lonely, but like at some point you got to look at yourself and say, hey, what am I doing wrong here? And that's what worries me about particular fandoms. That's why whenever I've made a film or written a film or whatever on a film, I'm always thinking about, in the back of my mind, how can someone take this too far? And that's kind of my self-censor as an artist. I'm looking at it going, can someone misinterpret this and you know, go crazy and kill a bunch of people and then all of a sudden cite my work and in a defense argument? Or is this, you know, rationalized in some kind of way that it's not what my intention was? So I mean, in some cases, I really try to be universal with a lot of things that I deal with in my art. But at other times, I look at things and I'm like, yeah, I got to be specific here. I got to really hone in on my point, because I don't want it to get lost in translation. I want to, I mean, and that's the beauty of it, is that sometimes I look at it as a lot of people look at things and are like, oh, I want everyone to love my work. And I look at certain things and I'm like, yeah, I don't want somebody to like this in the right way. You know what I mean? Like, sure. I'm okay with being canceled or, you know, ignored or whatever like that. As long as it doesn't go the full other direction, I can live with that. I can sleep at night. And if I don't make millions of dollars and become a household name, I can go on and live a happy life like that. I mean, we've spoken on this before in the past, but I mean, there is sort of, artists often get put in this position where they have a certain amount of responsibility towards what they're communicating, which is I mean, for me, it's hard to work through that, because the other part, I mean, part of the reason why I want to be an artist is to kind of say whatever the fuck I want, right? And to think whatever the fuck I want. And like, it's my avenue for self-expression. That becomes difficult when you sort of have to consider like your responsibility towards not just your work, but how your work impacts other people, right? I mean, that's a tricky one, because like this gets into sort of, you know, a decade or so or more ago, there was the whole argument about like, do violent video games impact young people in such a way that they're going to want to like mimic the things they do in video games in real life. Right. I think we've had enough experience so far in the world that we can, with some confidence, say no, it doesn't affect them. But still, one wonders, you know, like, do we get desensitized to violence and all that stuff, right? That's one of those things where for me, it's like, it's up to the responsibility of the people who are consuming it. Like you don't just like force feed, like people aren't being force fed sugar, right? Like they're choosing to eat candy bars. They're choosing to like do things that are unhealthy for them. We took my son trick-or-treating last night and he hasn't had a single bite of that candy. I've had most of it. The last thing I was just going to say is like, I mean, there is an argument to be said about, you know, addiction is a thing. Yeah. Addiction is real. Sugar is a very addictive substance. Absolutely. So, you know, sometimes you can say the same thing for art, right? Art can be addictive. Sure. People can have addictions to arts. Some people might want to argue that fans are addicted to a certain kind of art or genre or medium or whatever. Right? Yeah. We're looking at you, manga kids. I have definitely been a manga addict in my life, and kicked the habit as soon as I just couldn't afford it. That's usually the best. That's the best cold turkey mechanism that there is. But yeah, go ahead. But you know, the thing is if art can be an addiction, it's probably one of the healthier addictions you could have. Most part. What do you think, Jow? I would agree to that to some extent. And this is me being wishy-washy, but you know, I think you can be an art addict, but you need to consume different mediums, different artists, different genres. Just because that diversity, that variety in tone, message will really, I mean, if you're really absorbing something, you can, you know, watch a TV show and then, you know, a book and a comic book and a web series and then a movie later, you get like some kind of theme that's presented that kind of makes you think back to something that you consumed and go, I don't know which artist I agree with here. And that's because it's not so black and white as things like political things where it's just like, oh, this is the party I should be because the other party's stupid. Like when you look at two different artists and you don't know anything, we've talked about this in the past, you don't really know anything about the creator's personal life or their politics or anything like that. If you're just looking at the work, the body of work or the piece, and you're absorbing a message or whatever, you can very well balanced figure yourself out a little bit better, where you can be like, wow, somebody just gave me advice and while, you know, I wouldn't recommend trusting advice from a stranger, at the same time, you know, there's merit to it. If they're not specifically aiming it at you, if they're just saying something in general, it can unlock a door in your mind, and you can go through that door and explore the room and see what's in there. And I don't want to call it a safe space because that doesn't sound right, but it's like, it's an opportunity to investigate different thought and in your mind dissect them to figure out, you know what I mean? To figure out where you stand on a particular thing. Now, the problem is when social media chimes in and everybody starts saying one particular direction, and you might start thinking, wow, I didn't have that reaction. I didn't get to that conclusion. That's when I think people start feeling lonely. And they start feeling ostracized. They don't feel like they're part of a community anymore. I've had plenty of times where in the horror community, people are so dead set that one movie is fucking awesome. And I watched it and I didn't get it. And I was just like, maybe I got to watch it again. Like I don't know what it is. And then I watch it again and I'm still lost. And it's like, I don't know what's wrong with me. And then I start going inwards and it becomes about me and not about the art. You know what I'm saying? Sure. So I think social media kind of starts to skew things. And I kind of, as much as the top two things that are fought about on social media are art and politics.
Oh yeah.
People don't even fight about religion anymore. Can you believe that? Like when is the last time you saw when is the last time you saw a Christian, a Muslim, an atheist fighting on Twitter? You haven't. You watched two movie nerds fighting over something.
That's because they're all too busy like arguing about Superman being gay. They figured it out. They figured out the way to solve that conflict.
Yeah, we fill one problem with another problem, and then we don't have to think about the bigger problem, which is the fact that we don't have tolerance for other people's experiences.
Yeah. No, I mean it is something that has been going on for a while now. Is like competition between different sects within a fan base, right?
Yeah.
Especially because so much that's been happening, particularly with stuff centered around comic books, right? Because the comic, like mainstream comic books have gone through this big change where a lot of characters are changing, you know, like there's been a lot of attempts at like doing more diverse roles for these very iconic characters and stuff like that. And it's been met with a lot of resistance from a lot of people, and it's been praised by a lot of other people, and it's turned into a big fight, right? It's turned into this thing of like, you know, oh, this is happening for X, Y, or Z because, and then sometimes it gets conspiratorial, sometimes it gets like, you know, very resentful, basically. And it's one of those things where it's just like, for me, I look at it and I go, well, you can just say you don't like it anymore, and that's okay, and move on. Like, you know, like you had your toy for a time and the toy changed. They made a new version of the toy. And if you don't like the new version, you can go make your own version. That's my biggest option.
That's my biggest thing to everybody is so when I watch a movie, I think I've said this before, my biggest problem is I usually go into a movie knowing what the premise is. And then I have an expectation already set. It's just an artist thing. And if you're an artist, you know exactly what the fuck I'm talking about. You hear a premise and your mind works into the potential of where would I go with that? Oh, this would be fun. That would be cool. Oh, I could make this happen. And then that would be cool. That would be a really great moment. And then I can kind of do this. And then the audience would be like, aw, it's just a default mechanism a lot of storytellers have. So when I come out of a movie, 9 times out of 10, I'm disappointed because it's not what I would have done. And the first thing I think of is, oh, I can do that. I can go and I can take Superman and I can make him into a martial arts guy, and I can write a Superman movie and call it The Indomitable Spirit, and all of a sudden I've got my Superman movie, and it's just a guy in a fucking black belt, and he's doing Superman things. And
you're really pointing out the thing that probably does. You and me are both frustrated probably with the same thing, which is that It's too much. Like, people are putting too much reliance on big companies to solve their like internal issues with a given product.
Absolutely, yeah.
Like, to me, that is part of the cycle of addiction, is when you put the power in somebody else to like solve your problems and what you want, you know?
Yep.
So it's like everybody's waiting for that next hit of like that, whatever it was that was like the Superman experience or the Spider-Man experience that they had as a kid.
Right.
And it's like, dude, it fucking move on, because like you're not going to get it again. Nobody can read your mind and figure out that experience that you want. You have to make it yourself.
Yep.
Or make the money to find somebody to make it for you, I guess. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, go ahead.
Or you have to put up the money to give somebody to do it for you. And that's what I've tried to do. I mean, granted, I haven't really produced content in a while. I'm working on solving that problem actively. Haunted 2023, folks. But at the same time, like, you know, as an artist, I don't feel like I have to hate something, because if you look at something now, I know you're not a big horror fan. You kind of got a dip of this last week when Joker and Aaron were here, but the Halloween Kills thing, where the fan base was so divided over it, like they're fucking like shaming each other and hate speeching like over the fucking movie just because someone liked it. I moderately liked it. I didn't love it. I didn't really hate it. I had my issues with it. It was, you know, it was rewarding in some aspects and disappointing in others. And I didn't decide. This is the last time I watched something that I remember getting this kind of like a heat. And I say heat because friction between two sides was The Last Jedi. And I remember taking sides in that fucking one where I was like, this fucking movie is horrible and blah, 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 and I don't understand why someone would like it. Blah, blah, blah. Like, and after that, I grew and I realized this doesn't fucking matter, because I took in this art and there was maybe one or two things I liked, and the rest of the things was I didn't get differently. It didn't hit for me. And the bright side is that if you look at the divisiveness, there are a lot of people on your side who are probably instinctually, subconsciously looking for the same thing you did. And if you can kind of hone in on that group, you've just found your fucking audience. Like, do you know what I mean?
Sure.
Like, to not look at it. And then you can look at it and go, oh, this person liked The Last Jedi. They're probably not going to like my thing. I probably shouldn't push it on them. Like, you can do that. Like, you have to set your own expectations as an artist as to which fan base you're courting at a particular time. And it's hard to figure that stuff out day to day. But when you look at something and like, I look at Last Jedi, and Last Jedi was about a teacher who had failed and rejected the call of doing it one more time. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's a deep subtext about failure and overcoming that and depression and all that kind of stuff. Those themes are there. How they were executed did not resonate with me. But they did with other people, and that's fine. I have to accept that, but I can look at that and go, okay, I see what Rian Johnson did. I don't agree with it. I didn't like it. It didn't resonate with me. So now I know what not to do when I do mine. And I can probably expect a similar divisiveness, but that doesn't matter, because I'm fulfilling myself as an artist, and the people that I was targeting, hopefully I'll have them on my side. They'll buy a ticket. They'll buy the DVD. They'll become that crazy fan base that I'm just talking about. But
I've definitely had moments like that, like with like Star Trek. I'm a huge Star Trek fan, but like the last couple of things that happened, I was just like, I'm not really into the direction of it. Like, I just wasn't into. I watched the first season and a half of Discovery, and it didn't fit my taste for it. And so I was just like, okay, well, Star Trek's moving on. I kind of got my jollies out of it. Ironically, it's influenced me in terms of how I write stories in a formatting sense and how I think about developing character arcs. And I was like, okay, well, that's what I take from it. And now I'm done. And now it's somebody else's turn to step in. You know, it's somebody else. Like, the new direction that the franchise is going is for somebody else. And were you going to say something, Joe?
Well, I was going to get back to how you had talked about letting the corporate overlords decide how our content is handled. Joss Whedon, who is now a besmirched name to mention, but he made an incredible series called Firefly. And that basically came out of him just wanting to do a Han Solo spinoff. You know what I'm saying? And then he was able to operate within a realm of he basically wrote a Han Solo spinoff, and he did not have to deal with a crazy fandom that's like, well, in Star Wars, you're not supposed to be able to do. He could play however he wanted with that particular archetype character of Han Solo, and it worked out great. In the Halloween debate, do you know how many timelines there are in the Halloween franchise, Mr. Rainwater?
I'll just pick a number and say like 5.
Yeah, you're pretty much close. There's the H2O timeline, the H2O timeline, the Jamie Lloyd timeline, the Halloween 3 anthology timeline, the Rob Zombie timeline, and the David Gordon Green Halloween Kills, the most recent one.
So there's almost like the Legend of Zelda series. Like there's this whole thing going on in the Legend of Zelda series for a long time where people were like trying to make all the games fit together, even though every single game has always been this standalone story. But for some reason, one game implied that like it was connected to another one, and then suddenly everybody started forming their headcanons. And then they started demanding Nintendo to like validate and verify their headcanons. At which point I was like, I'm not interested in this anymore, because that's not. I didn't get into the Legend of Zelda series for this reason. I got into it because I was like, they're fun games, and every single thing stands alone on its own. I don't have to like have some encyclopedic knowledge of like, oh, well, this one boss fight at this one time means blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I don't really care.
Do you think that's like a low key form of gatekeeping? Because the in jokes and stuff like that, people demand that other things be referenced. So that way they can kind of gatekeep who has seen the things that they have seen, and who it makes them feel superior. It's like, oh, you don't get that joke because you didn't watch. Like you watch the Marvel series, and they have Endgames. If you went to go see Marvel Endgame and the On Your Left moment happened and the crowd goes nuts, and you hadn't seen Captain America Winter Soldier when Cap is running by Sam and he goes, on your left, on your left. That moment doesn't make any sense to you. It's just, hey, on your left. Whatever like that. It's just, oh, it goes right over your head. It's just a line. Yeah. But for other people, it's like, oh, you didn't get that? Ho, 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 dork, loser, blah, blah, blah. What are you doing? Get out of the theater. Stop commenting. Like, it's gatekeeping to want that continuity sometimes. Like there used to be episodic television that you didn't have to watch every single episode. You could tune in, miss an episode here and there, and just come back. And it's basically what a sitcom is, situational comedy, where you show up, it's these characters that you know, and here's the predicament of the week. It's not like an overarching story. It's not kind of, things that are callback unless it's like a 2-part episode or some shit like that. And that kind of thing was accepted back in the day. Like now I have a hard time thinking of anything that's episodic and not stretched over multiple episodes or multiple seasons, like where story arc from beginning to end, where it's not just pop in, deal with the characters and leave.
A lot of that stuff has been relegated to like animated sitcoms, basically, because they're kind of the only surviving sitcoms. Yeah, Rick and Morty, The Simpsons, Family Guy, American Dad, stuff like that. And even in those shows, there'll still be callbacks to other stuff and whatever. But in that sense, it's more like just for the really long-term fans, it's not that big of a deal, right? You don't have to know it to know what's going on,
right?
Within any given episode. And it's actually something for me, like I've been thinking about after Trailer Park Warlock is something that I think I'm going to want to do, because for me, I'm learning that it's really hard to grow an audience if everything within your work is so like entangled. You know what I mean? There is something to be said about having a work where anybody could enter in it at any point and enjoy it just as much, right? And you're kind of what you're describing is like, I wouldn't say it's a missing art form or a lost art form. It's just the opposite of it. Having these big arcs has been just the big thing for so long. I kind of suspect, and I say this because for myself, like I kind of suspect that that's a thing that's we're hitting the peak of, because people are burning out on it.
Yep.
And burning out on like that kind of fan base where it's like you have to know like in order for you to talk with your friend about it, you know, at the water cooler, you know, you have to watch
27 movies in the next 3 days before the next movie comes out. And yeah,
exactly. Like we may have hit peak Game of Thronesification. You know what I mean?
Yep. I got that way because I had a friend of mine who wanted to go see Endgame and had not seen a single Marvel movie, and they were like, "Where do I start?" And I'm just like, "I'm not going to explain this to you. It's too complicated. Watch a couple of them, and watch the starting ones, and go from there." But don't you just wish you could just go to a movie or turn on a TV show, not know really what the fuck's going on, and just be able to
Absolutely.
be like, "Oh, da da da." Like that's one of the reasons why I still go back and watch Boy Meets World. They have overlapping story arcs just like any other TV show or whatever, but it wasn't so much an episode-to-episode storyline that just carried you throughout the entire season, the entire series. I mean, it's Corey and Topanga and Sean and Eric, and that's basically, what it is.
I haven't stopped rewatching episodes of Mystery Science Theater 3000 for that very reason, because I can just pop in at any given point in time. And there's so many channels now online where you can where it's streaming it 24/7. So I don't even have to start at the beginning. Like I can just jump in and I know what's going on. And because of that also, MST3K has a very avid fan base. They're a smaller fan base, but they've been there from the beginning, and that's the kind of stuff they're into. You know what I mean? Like you don't have to. It's a very not gatekeepy kind of fan base for that reason.
That's probably one of the very few, because I've yet to really see fan bases that don't have gatekeeping. Now, granted, I don't want to say I have gatekeeped, but I've come across as a gatekeeper unintentionally before. I've asked questions to people only because sometimes I'll have a hot take and I want to know where they stand before I show my cards. And by asking the question, "Oh, what are your thoughts on blah, 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 blah?" It might come off as gatekeeping, whereas it's really just self-preservation, where I'm like, I don't want to come out as a fan of a particular character who, is despised by the rest of the fandom because I'm going to get, ostracized because of it. But it's really interesting to think about, the extreme things that fans do in order to, I don't know what their end game is. I've used that word a lot this particular episode, end game, but I don't know what their end game is. I don't know what you get from criticizing a creator, criticizing a fellow fan, or from throwing yourself into a fictional reality, so much so that you're just ignoring everything else. Like, there are people who LARP and there are people who LARP. Sure. You know what I mean? Like if you watched What We Do in the Shadows, I really enjoy that one particular episode where the guy is putting down, I think her name is Beanie Siegel, I think the actress's name is. But he's talking about mead tasting like Griffin piss, and he's really into the Renaissance Fair overdrive of his LARPing world. Whereas they were just talking about, forming clans for something. I don't know. I'm not into that stuff, but he just took it too far. And you know what I mean? And it's so off-putting, especially, and I'm going to speak as a creator who hasn't had this happen to them yet, but I got to imagine if it happened to me, I would not see that person as a quote unquote fan. I would see that person as, what's the opposite? I'm not a hater, but what's the opposite of a
skeptic? I don't know. A non-believer. I've been thinking about it in religious terms, but
I would call them a wrench. Because the idea is they are a wrench in the cog of the machinery of a fandom. A fandom is something that supports.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
That supports an art or a piece or an medium, an artist, so to speak. But they are dismantling how it's supposed to work correctly. Whether you're hating on a piece or you're so overly into it that you are turning off others, and it's almost like they're trying to like have the fandom all to themselves, like it's like a pie that they don't want to share. And to me, that's destructive behavior to a creator, to a fan, to a piece, an artist, a creator, however you want to label it. That would make me not want to make any more. You know what I mean? Like if I had like a hit TV show and I realized the majority of my fandom started getting very cliquey and all that kind of stuff, I'd be like, all right, I'm canceling the show. We're done after this season, because I wouldn't want to contribute to that. And I feel like that's the kind of world that we're in. Either that, or I would put it right in the art. I would start taking things that people were saying on Twitter and injecting them subtly into the context of whatever I was working on. So those people maybe see I was holding up a mirror and being like, hey, don't do this. But I don't know if they would be conscious enough to be able to recognize it.
Well, and this kind of thing with fandoms, I mean, it's kind of a tale as old as time if you... Depending on how you want. Yeah, exactly. That's where I was going to go, because the first thing that comes to my mind is thinking about the Protestant Reformation, which was this huge schism in Christianity, right? Because you had Catholicism, which at the time, I mean, I guess it wasn't technically called Catholicism, but at the time, the church had what could be described as corruption, perhaps. And there were people who were big fans of the Bible to the point that they were studying it like that was it. That was all they were studying. And so you have a person like Martin Luther who felt like the church of his time did not actually give that much of a shit about this book that he was really into. So like he was that much more into it that he basically was like, well, I'm splitting off. Well, he didn't. He actually he asked for reform, and that didn't happen. The church wanted to retain its authority and its power. They didn't want to go with what he was recommending and suggesting. So he's like, well, fuck it, I'm going to do it myself. And so that ended up leading to all the splintering, right, within this one faith. And fan bases go through that too, right, where you have somebody who sees themselves as more pure in their fandom than everybody else, as in they want to prove that like they've done the work to understand the art better than somebody else understands it, and they want to be an authority on it. And I think that might have something to do with a lot of that, where it's within fan bases, people try and establish hierarchies. And the only way to establish yourself in the pecking order is to prove like how much closer you are to God in that sense. In this sense, God being the creator or whatever, right?
Did you end up watching Midnight Mass?
I haven't watched it yet. Is this something that's topically related?
Absolutely. I'm not gonna talk about it, but people that are watching or listening that have seen Midnight Mass will know what I'm talking about. And one day you will too, Mr. Rainwater. I would put that one on the back burner though, because it's not the right season for it anymore. I would wait until late spring, early summer.
Okay.
It's got a good, that would be a better tone for it, or October next year, whatever.
Yeah.
But no, it would be crazy. The way the Bible has split off splinter groups of different interpretations to it. It would be crazy to see if fandoms did the same thing for things.
I mean, how could it not be the case? I mean, I would imagine within horror, you're part of a particular fandom that's so separate from like another maybe more zealous fandom or less zealous fandom or whatever. I've only discovered really two different fandoms in horror. There are people who love
pretty much everything, not everything, but pretty much everything. And there are people who love just fucking gore, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I totally understand what you're talking about.
There are gore hounds and there are horror fans. Like, all gore hounds are horror fans, but not all horror fans are gore hounds, if that makes any kind of sense. It's like
and
jacuzzi and hot tub.
To go to what you were talking about, or when you were talking about Trailer Park Warlock, like, there is a slight schism in my fan base that's like people who really like the lore and backstory and want to learn more, and people who are like, let's just go back to like Jake Baker doing whatever bullshit. And I'm always working between those two lines because both of those things are fun for me. But I think the splintering is inevitable. It's whether or not you can make the splintering, or you can help guide the splintering to be in such a way that it doesn't become
a war
toxic.
Yeah. Because
that's the real. Go on, Joe.
I'm pretty sure in the Star Wars fandom, the 501st and the Jedi Temple don't really have a beef. You know what I mean? Like, they're not over here going, the Empire is better and they're the real heroes and like, nobody's doing that. Like, it's very clear what's going on there. But like you said, it's weird, but even like in the something like the Superman camp, there are two people who are like, yeah, we need to modernize Superman, and he needs to lose the underwear, and he's got to, he's got to change his slogan, and maybe he's got offspring that are LGBTQ, maybe, and like then there's the people that are like, no, classic Superman needs to be classic Superman. Doesn't need to change. Leave him alone. It's fine. And those two fandoms cannot get along. They just. Well,
what's so weird to me about that in DC is it's not like the stories haven't always been changing. Like, Superman used to have a fucking mullet in the 90s. I mean, like, he's died at least once. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's gonna keep changing. It's not like, to me, it's like the reaction is like, oh well, Superman now is no longer saying the original slogan and all this other stuff. He'll never be the same again. And it's like, no, it just means like later on you're going to end up reading a story by somebody who wants to like, we're going to do old classic Superman for this run or whatever. It's always, it never just like 100% goes away because somebody always wants to like capitalize.
Nostalgia is a cash cow, and in order, and it goes to that old expression, how can I miss you if you don't go away? And that's 100% a corporate bet that's going on here. It's like, hey, maybe we need to fuck up for a little while so that way when we get good again. Like, I'm not saying that what they're doing is fucking up, but I'm just saying, like, there's a mentality that goes into it from a business standpoint of, hey, let's try something. And if it fails, then we can always go back to what worked. And if it does work, then we'll keep making money. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's really a win-win scenario. To me, I look at it and go, okay, well, number one, and this is something I had to learn when it came to the Halloween franchise, when I started looking at the Rob Zombie films, which were remakes, and then complete off the wall, crazy Rob Zombie-ness. I looked at them as, when I went in for original viewing, I looked at it as like, oh, I'm getting a modern version with modern quality of the classic story. And that was where my expectation was set. What I got was something completely style, like the style was different with modern stuff. And I hated it. I hated it. I was like, this is not what Halloween is. Da, 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 da. Years later, I revisited it and I'm like, this is a breath of fresh air. I love that Rob Zombie did not copy John Carpenter and he did his own thing. I enjoy the shit out of this. Like, I've watched Halloween 1978 a bajillion times this year. And now I'm watching Rob Zombies, and you know what? I was in the mood for Michael Myers and Halloween and da-da-da, but I got a little something different. It's like you can only have KFC so much before you want Popeyes. And it's fucking fried chicken, but it's a little bit different in the recipe. And that's what makes it fun. So I look at it, and then I realize this is what really made me come to that conclusion of looking at Rob Zombies differently was just because Rob Zombies exists does not mean that John Carpenter's goes out of print. I have a 4K fucking disc of 1978 Halloween. I don't have a 4K of Rob Zombies. It did not detriment the entire thing. I'm looking at the Halloween franchise. There's 5 different fucking timelines. So literally, if I'm not down with the current incarnation, right? Because they've all spurned off the original. If I'm not down with the current one, as a filmmaker, I know in my mind, one day I could make a quote unquote sequel to the original 1978 Halloween, call it Halloween 2, and do what I wanted to do and what I want to see. And it doesn't fucking matter. Like nobody, like everybody will pick up on it. They did it with Superman too. Brandon Routh was the same Superman that Christopher Reeve was, right? And nobody gave a problem about that.
The Superman one in particular really astounds me, and I'm sort of fixated on it because for me, like, I like maybe the first 3 movies, because I'm pretty sure I watched the first 3 or 4 with you. I'm trying to remember what.
3 is with Richard Pryor and the Evil Robots. We did watch that one. 4 is when he fights Nuclear Man, which is the Dolph Lundgren wannabe that Lex Luthor makes by throwing nukes into the sun.
That was the one I didn't care for as much, although it has its charm.
I think nowadays, if you watched it, you would have a different appreciation for it.
But I wasn't really into Superman as a character until I read like All-Star Superman by Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely. They had like an interpretation of the character that responded to me because they treated him as like a mythopoetic character, as in like he was like a sun god basically, and it wasn't like a literal thing, but they were kind of making allusions and metaphors with it. And the way that story is done really had this quality of Superman as this ideal person who is going to do like his damnedest to do the best. And to me, that's like, that encapsulates all the ideas that I love about Superman, which is like, he represents a Superman, somebody who is above human, whose ideals are better than human ideals, who's stronger, who's like, more intellectually capable and all this other stuff. So like, it evokes an idea of like thinking about like, what is your ideal better self? Like, what does a better tomorrow look like? So for me, like, that's when I really got into the idea of Superman and the character of Superman. And I would say I'm a fan of All-Star Superman. I would love to see more ideas within that given set, or at least somebody who wants to pick up that particular, flag and see where else that could go, if it could go anywhere else.
I haven't read that. I might put that on my read list.
It's definitely one of my favorites. I mean, and then and with Batman, like I love Bruce Timm's interpretation of Batman.
Oh yeah, now we're talking my language.
Like I've never really been that into the Batman comics, but the animated series was like where I got in. And to me, that encapsulated like all of the intrigue, all of the darkness, all of the like complicated inter-character relationships.
Yep.
Like that's where I got in, and I get off usually when it's like, Red Hood and all of his like, all the splinters of all the Robins and shit. I'm like, I'm not that interested. Like, I'm more interested in just seeing Batman solve mysteries and like get into tiffs with the Joker and stuff like that, but in a way that's meaningful and like insightful into like the human persona. It's got
a theme to it. It's not just all punching and gadgets and stuff like that, which I mean, all that stuff is great, but in the end of the day, it's set dressing. If you're not walking away from something with some kind of meaning, it's why we really go in the first place.
And I know that there are people who are 100%, they're more into like the Red Hood shit and like, the Arkham Knights type stuff.
Do you think a lot of those people, because I think that can be the same application here as to what I was talking about with the gore hounds and the horror people, is there's a lot, it really comes down to fashion versus substance in a weird way. No, I mean, and I'm not putting down fashion and aesthetics like that. I'm not, because I absolutely acknowledge as an artist, visuals matter. Like that,
Yeah.
like that
No,
kind of
there are
stuff is
people-
important, but I'm not
there are
here
people for
solely
whom-
for it.
Absolutely. There are people for whom Jim Lee is like the definitive Batman artist, right?
Sure.
And because he did a lot of Batman stories that for a lot of people, that's their defining story. I don't feel like there is a defining Batman artist for myself. I really like Bruce Timm. I really have seen I've seen Neil Adams' work that is like incredible. I've seen Jim Lee work that's incredible. And I also have enjoyed some episodes of Batman Brave and the Bold because they're just kind of silly and goofy. It's a totally different, weird interpretation of Batman.
Yeah.
For me, I kind of look at it as like Batman is the vehicle for this particular set of ideas, and let's see where they go, you know? And for others, and I mean, I get it. For others, that's not the case, right? For them, it's like, I want to see more Jim Lee Batman. But were you going to say something, Joe?
I was going to ask you, who's the artist and who's the writer between Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale? Jeff Loeb is the writer, right?
Give me a second. I think so.
I think Tim Sale is the artist. That's where I was really.
Yeah, he is.
That kind of like stickly drawing. That's kind of closest to my Batman, where it's not really.
Okay.
It's and you know, if you've read Dark Victory or Long Halloween, those comics to me are what Batman is. That's my Batman in graphic form. If we're really talking about it, and I love Bruce Timm, and that's definitely like the foundation of my real love for Batman. But like Michael Keaton and Tim Burton, what they did was very formative to me. Yeah. Christian Bale and Nolan was, to me, creme de la creme Batman. And you know this because you've seen Batman Begins as many times as I have because you lived with me. But like the point of the matter is like I've looked at all of those things, and it's like sometimes I want spaghetti for dinner and sometimes I want pizza. Yeah. And it's really a reformation of the same two things. You know, you got your tomato sauce and you got some cheese on top and some oregano mixed in, and you know, there's some kind of bread component, whether it's the pasta or the bread base or the dough that forms the crust, but it's the same fucking thing, but reformatted in a different way. And it's like telling someone, it's so weird to me, and I'm getting into my food analogy, as I usually do, but it's so weird to me that someone will tell me that spaghetti sucks because they don't like spaghetti, but they like pizza. And it's like, I don't know what we're talking about anymore. Why are we fighting over this? Who cares? And then some other people will be like, upset that other people didn't like something, and it's like, well, why don't you like it? I like it. And it's like,
I think for you and me, probably the thing that is most disorienting, right? And I'm gonna kind of go back at this again from a religious angle, because this is for me a very personal story about like growing up. I grew up as a very devoutly Christian kid, right? And I really loved the church that. What's that?
Samesies.
Oh, okay. And for me, the church that I was in was like another part of my home and my family. Oh, okay. But as I was getting older and asking more questions, it became really apparent to me that I didn't quite fit in with the church, and felt more and more like, not necessarily overtly ostracized, but certainly like if I had certain questions or if I had certain ideas, they weren't allowed, you know, within the fandom.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And for me, like I had feelings about religion that went outside just went outside the fandom a little bit, even though for me, I was like, it's basically like I went from, oh yeah, I love Batman, but I also like Superman and Spider-Man. And then they were like, no, you can only love Batman. Only Batman.
This here is a Batman church. We are a Batman fearing country.
And I was like, you know, for me, it's like, but they're all comic books and they're all great to read, you know? And it was that kind of thing where you can only read Batman. And so for me, like I, you know, slowly, lost more and more touch with that community, in the sense of I never felt like I belonged to it. And I still haven't really, in terms of like my own personal spiritual religious life, I still don't feel like I have a community that I would call. It's kind of just like I have my set of fandoms, and I like to meet people who like to talk about it and aren't, you know, who don't get into who realize that, you know, it's all comic books. It's all the same, you know, set of ideas and stuff, you know? So like, I guess for me, the whole reason I'm saying this is, for me, it's like, what's really hard about coming to those realizations and what can be really difficult is that loss of community and loss of touch with people for whom you want to have that connection with.
Yeah.
Right. And that's where it becomes that's where toxic fandoms can become really harmful, because you end up severing connections amongst people. You cause more disharmony than harmony, you know? Like, I don't feel like harmony is worth, how was I going to put this? Like, I don't feel like disharmony is worth purity, basically. In other words, what I'm trying to say is, like, people who want to, like, keep everything within the fandom pure, right?
Yeah.
Like, in other words, going back to the original analogy, like, this is a Batman church, right? I don't feel like that's worth the disharmony it causes when people are like, yeah, but I like Superman, Spider-Man too. Can we talk about that every once in a while? Or like, can we at least keep me accepted into the, you know, the community?
Yeah.
You know? But that's a hard argument to make with a lot of people. And that's something I've had to come to accept, you know, that I'm always going to be within the community that I originally grew up in. I'm always going to be kind of an alien and a weirdo to them, because I'm going outside of territory they feel comfortable with. And that's the other part of it, right? Is it's like, for those really pure fans, yeah, I guess for them, it's like there are zones of discomfort that they just don't want to go into. They want to keep on to their comfort blanket, basically.
And 9 times out of 10, it's because they are afraid they're going to like it. And I don't know why. I don't know why people shy away from things that they enjoy, which is a weird thing to talk about after the last hour that we've talked about people who go too far with the things that they like, but they will go out of their way to shun and shit on things that they'll probably enjoy, because there's a weird vanity involved where they're looking to stay a part of that community. You know what I mean? It's like, once I step outside that community, once I let people know I'm into this, it's like kink shaming. You know what I mean? Like, once someone finds out about, I like feet, then all of a sudden I'm a weirdo. And it's like, I can't tell anybody that. Not that I'm in the feet. It's not a thing for me. But the point that I'm making is,
go on.
The point that I'm making is like, that's how the hatred and bigotry and stuff starts, is like just a show for other people, so that you can remain in a community and not be ostracized. So I almost feel like the people that are brave enough to take that bold step, whether, you know, you can equate it to someone who comes out being gay. Like, it's the same thing. And this is how I try to explain to people how, as a writer, I can write different voices, whether it be black or gay or female or something that I'm not. It's not hard to look at a universal theme about becoming ostracized from a community that you were normally accepted from.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? There's a real fear there, because there's safety in numbers. And whether it's physical safety or emotional safety, like mental health, like, people will cling to that thing that I can't be that, because that'll get me kicked out of the club. And the people who are willing to go, no, I like Batman, and I like Superman, and I like Spider-Man, Wonder Woman a little, Green Lantern, no, The Flash, yeah, but only when he's Wally West and not Barry Allen. Like, when you start drawing the lines of who you are, people will either go, that's cool, man, I like that too, or I don't like that, but hey, whatevs. And then there's people who will be like, fuck you. And it's like, that's the best thing you can do as a person, because then you start identifying, all right, maybe I'm not hanging out with Charlie anymore. Like, and that'll be good for me, because Charlie's got some shit he's got to work through. Or you can look at Charlie and go, dude, it's okay. Like, you don't have to like Superman. It's fine. We can still be friends. Like, I identify with Superman because it's the kind of guy that I want to be. I want to be cheesy. I'm okay with being cheesy. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with being cheesy. But if you want to be pissed off and break bones and be Batman, that's cool too. Like, there's no problem with liking different stuff. It really, it'd be like going to Taco Bell and you order 5 crunchy tacos and your friend orders a gordita and all of a sudden they fucking hate you because you got regular tacos. What the fuck are we doing?
Yeah, exactly.
That's go ahead.
I was gonna say, were you ever involved with the ancient the console wars? Does that ring a bell to you at all?
Kind of. I wasn't in the whole Xbox versus PlayStation, but I was kind of in the N64 versus GameCube people. Okay. So I kind of know what you're talking about. That's an interesting
one. I hadn't heard about that one. For me, this was the era of GameCube, PS2, and Xbox, right?
Okay.
That was the era when the console wars were at their peak, basically. And nerds like myself furiously got onto message boards to like argue, why our particular console, because usually it was because we can only afford one, was going to be the best one. So it'd be like, oh, well, GameCube has the best games because Nintendo's the best game maker. All these other games suck, and all this other hours wasted just arguing about like why one was better than the other and whatever. And then as I'm older, I realized like that was partially manufactured to like stoke, fire between nerdy boys so that like they can be more avid towards their particular brand.
Yep.
You know what I mean? It's just like another corporate advertising tool, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. So
let's
piss them off because that'll get them. The worst thing, it's like professional wrestling. They always tell the wrestlers, if you get cheered, that's great. If you get booed, that's great. If you come out there and the crowd is silent, that's terrible. You're probably getting fired. And that's universal business practice where as long as you make them feel something, you're going to make money.
Yeah.
That's, you know what I mean? Like whenever a movie comes out and you hear all this thing about, oh, it's so terrible. We're protesting this movie. You're protesting the movie? Oh, now I got to see it. I want to know why you're protesting it. Half the time, it's not even right now. I noticed that there's a whole bunch of marketing out for Marvel's Eternals because it has a gay character. And right now they are stoking the flames of homophobia by saying that like the IMDb score was being review bombed by homophobes just to stoke interest in the movie. Because I went on IMDb, you can't rate the fucking movie, you can't review it yet because it's not out. The fucking story was a plant. Like there's no, you know what I mean? Like they're literally just trying to get people, up in arms about homophobia because they're trying to remember, Marvel's Eternals, Marvel's Eternals, Marvel's Eternals. As long as we keep saying the name of the movie, people will remember it. When it comes out, they're either going to really see it or they're going to go on a fucking Twitter and advertise for us and say Marvel's Eternals because I'm not going to see it, blah, 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 blah. I don't care if you're not seeing it. You're advertising for free for me that the movie is out. Exactly. And that's all that they're after. Absolutely.
And I have to say, like, after having this conversation, it kind of unveils for me something that I personally have not necessarily struggled with, but I'm becoming a little bit more aware of, which is that I've always sort of like veered away as much as I could from fan groups. And it's because like on a really intuitive level, I've always wondered and been skeptical about like how easily are fan groups able to be manipulated? You know what I mean?
Easily.
And that for me, I've always felt uncomfortable with that, where I'm just like, you do realize like you're being kind of pulled around, right? Like I don't like that feeling personally. Yeah. And a lot of people aren't as aware of it or
they're not keen to it. No.
Yeah. And so that sucks though, because there are plenty of things that I'm a fan of and would love to talk with people about. I just don't like, for me, it's like, I just don't want to be grabbed into that, like that other aspect of it where you're constantly being manipulated or being pulled around by corporate interests, artists, whatever, whoever's trying to get your money, your dollar and your emotion.
That's why I like talking with you, Joker, Eric, like evil Eric Pullman, like fellow artists who understand me as an artist, themselves as an artist. Because last week we talked about Bride of Frankenstein, a movie that I absolutely fucking hate. You listed it as your favorite of the Universal monster movies. We have not called quits on our friendship because of this. Like,
and also a lot of the points you had made in regards to Dracula, especially with Dracula, but all those other movies are such good points in terms of the artistry and all that stuff. It's hard I'm never gonna ignore and not admit, like, fucking what's the name of the dude who plays Van Helsing?
Edward Van Sloan.
I'm never gonna not admit that, like, that's one of the best performances ever. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that outstrips anything that happens in Bride of Frankenstein. But for me, just personally, emotionally, that was the movie that I was just like pulled into, right? And so, like, yeah, going with what you were saying, when being able to talk about art with people, it's like there always has to be a personal admittance of, like, yeah, this is my point of view.
Yep.
This is my opinion. And my opinion matters to me, but it's still, at the end of the day, just my fucking opinion.
Right.
And there are certain objective ways that you can sort of validate art, but even that is still, it's just a way of looking at it. And you can always return to, but how do I feel about it?
Yeah. It's the same way. It's going back to the religious thing. It's about the interpretation, and the interpretation is basically being filtered through experiences and prejudices and biases that all of us have. And I'm not saying prejudices and biases in a negative connotation. I'm just saying those are the filters that have been slotted into our brains, and they're formed by personal experiences. I don't care if me and you live in the same house. At some point in the day, we both go out and go different places and see different things, meet different people. You know what I mean? Like, those things are going to be unique to us. And it doesn't matter.
That's an interesting thing to bring up too, because for the last month, I've been sharing a house with a friend of the pod, Soko. And it's definitely been, for me, like, kind of remembering what it's like to have a roommate again. It's like he leaves at his own time and has his own schedule, and exactly what you were saying, right? Where he's had his own experiences where I'm like we're being invited to an event tomorrow where he kind of met somebody, and it turned into this whole thing. And I'm like, oh shit, I guess I just wanted to say that in order to validate what you were saying in regards to when you pull multiple experiences together, you get also new possibilities. And that, to me, is also the other thing that's really sad with communities or fan bases that are always trying to, like, purify or consolidate into whoever's just going to, like, for lack of a better analogy, toe the party line or whatever.
Yeah.
It decreases the amount of possibilities that particular group can accomplish. And that, to me, is sad, because I like novelty. I like new possibilities.
Yeah. And I think that's what people need. It goes back to the whole storytelling conundrum. Your main character wants something, but in the end, this is about what they need. And that's the journey that they're really on. And I think people need to really look into that, because for me, now I have 2 Halloween films. I have the John Carpenter one and the Rob Zombie one, and I can enjoy them fucking both. And 10 years ago, I probably could not have done that. And you know what I mean? Like, I was robbed. But I robbed myself of the enjoyment, the perspective, the diversity. Like, I robbed myself, and I think a lot of people need to get over that. So I think, coming back to our main topic, which has now really become more about toxic fandom than it is about delving too far into a reality. But I guess that's what it really was always about. The point that I think we're trying to make here today is fandom cannot be pure. You can't be pure in terms of inhabiting a medium or an art or a story or a piece or whatever like that. It needs to be contaminated with things you don't like, things you don't agree with, things that you have not experienced, things that you don't see, things that you don't understand. Because, and how an audience person or a fan reacts to them really says something about the fan more than it does about the piece. Does that make sense? Like, that's the way I looked at the Halloween Kills thing. It's like, okay, if two people disagree, that's fine. If one person thinks the other person is a fucking idiot for liking it or hating it, the person on the other end of it needs to see that's a personal flaw going on in the other person throwing the shit. Like, they're not an adult. This is not a person who I need to be conversing with, or I need to converse with them in a different way to get them to stop throwing shit and be open and receptive and grow. You know what I mean? Or you need to grow, or like, there's so many different ways to look at it. So I think really what we're getting down to is that I think fandom, if you are a fan, you need to you need to be evaluating yourself and the other fans unbiasedly as you can. You need to stop judging the people for their tastes and ask questions. It's something that you said before that I loved, which was when you were talking about the religious thing about asking questions.
Yeah.
The number one way you can either destroy someone's argument or grow yourself is not by stating your point of view or stating your evidence, but by asking questions about theirs. Because if they can't ask, or they can't answer the question, the argument will fall in upon itself and they will come to a realization, or you're going to get answers that's going to help you understand, if not agree, with their standpoint. You know what I'm saying? So I think questions are the key to maintaining civility and growing and personal growth within fandoms. Yeah. I think that's really what it comes down to. Do you have any opinions on that?
I 100% agree with that. And I mean, for me, asking questions is probably one of the more fun things that I can do with my life in general. So like, I feel comfortable with people who ask lots of questions, you know, like I feel comfortable with people who generally have more questions than answers, because I generally have more questions than answers. And usually I really enjoy conversations where me and somebody else asks a question and neither of us know the answer. And then we go off researching and finding, you know, what are the possible answers to that. To me, that's like, that is kind of the heart of art making, is starting off with questions that you have and then seeing where it leads. And those are always, like I said, those are always the best friendships in my mind, you know?
Absolutely. So. Well, I think that'll about do it for this episode. We've gone an hour 20, which I don't want to run into another 2-hour episode. Last week was fucking great. Thank you to Joker and Aaron for coming on and indulging us with that awesome episode. We got more stuff coming up. We are coming up, Mr. Rainwater, on 1 year of Midnight at the Spaghetti Factory. Can you believe that we've been doing this almost 52 weeks?
Somehow we've managed it. That's awesome.
What started as a joke but by me on Twitter, when I had like 300 followers, I was like, oh, how many followers do I need before I have to start a podcast? And Rainwater goes, now, this many. And I don't even think you clicked on my profile to see where I was at. You were just being like jokey. And I said, hey, if you do it with me, I'll do it. And here we are. 52 or almost 52 weeks. I think we're at 48 or 49 now. We do have a special episode planned. Probably going to be a train wreck for our anniversary episode. So make sure you stay tuned with that. For Midnight at the Spaghetti Factory, I have been Jow. My wonderful co-host, as always, Rainwater, is here. Thank you guys for listening. Let me just say that. I know we don't have giant numbers. We really don't. I look at the analytics every now and then. We don't really care. I have fun doing this, so that's why we do it. But we do have a couple of pretty diehard people, and I don't think they're very vocal about it. Like, they don't interact with us about it. But I just want to shout out to our consistent listeners. You guys are cool. Thank you for indulging us in our philosophy rants and all this kind of nonsense. I hope we've contributed something to your life, as this is content that we are creating. And I really sincerely hope, I'm going to look directly down the camera right now. I sincerely hope we have helped you in one episode or another or many, with something in your art or something in your life. Sincerely, that has been our aim, other than just kind of waxing poetical about our bullshit beliefs and philosophies that we've formed by doing art and stuff over the years. But I do sincerely thank you guys for tuning in, because if the numbers were just 0, 0, 0, 0 week after week, I think I would just tell Matt here, I'd be like, dude, we're fucking done. But so thank you. It really means a lot. And I really do hope that we've helped you guys out at all.
Thanks for listening in on our conversations. And I like, just to kind of mirror what Jow was saying, like, I hope they mean something to you. I hope that you've been able to get some laughs and had some useful thoughts from our thoughts. And thanks for listening.
Or not feel so alone. Because I think a lot of the things that we discuss on this is a lot of things that artists themselves think about, but don't necessarily talk about. Do you know what I mean? Like, we didn't have these kinds of discussions in art school. We really didn't. It was mostly when we were in class, it was learning about technique and that kind of stuff. And then when we got home, it was about, hey, did you see that new episode of BTAS? Oh no, Joker made me watch Red Dwarf. Oh, blah, blah. Like, we were just like talking about that kind of shit. We didn't have philosophy-based discussions, and I think this is our age showing now. But if you're in the art world or just getting started, I can't forget that some people that might be listening to this may not be in their 30s. They might be in their early 20s and just picked up their first Wacom tablet, or, you know what I mean? Like, they're just getting started with filmmaking, and maybe they are picking up something that we've learned along the way. Because while we aren't celebrity, I do think that both of us are veterans in our own right with what we do in our mediums. And we definitely, I'm not trying to teach or anything, but I'm just saying these are the experiences that we have had, and maybe they will help you to avoid some pitfalls or maybe level up. And that's kind of been the goal since we really started this. So I really hope we've helped somebody out. If we have, please feel free to let me know. If you are an artist and you would like to come on and talk about maybe how we've helped, that would make a great anniversary episode as well. But I don't expect that to happen, but I think that would be fun. But hey, it is what it is. So let's wrap this up. Thank you guys. We will see you next week. Bye-bye.